President Trump is in London right now, and a few hours ago he met with the Queen and the rest of the royal family at Buckingham Palace. He landed his helicopter like a boss in the backyard of Buckingham Palace. Let the Queen try and say something about that. You try and say something about that. That is exactly where the president is going to land. Nothing you can do about it. But they're being respectful. You know, I know personally that the royals would want nothing more than to see Trump murdered. And I think that if Trump were smart, he would not eat anything at Buckingham Palace. He should probably eat before he goes there. There's something particular about the UK. I mean, Trump goes to a lot of places ever since he's been president. But it's only England where he has to fly everywhere because the security is so afraid of what could happen if he's driving around. It doesn't happen in France, Japan, even Saudi Arabia. They don't, it's just England. So I think he should be careful. But there's a lot of hypocrites who have chosen to boycott the banquet that's going to take place in a few hours, hosted by the Queen in honor of Donald Trump. John Bercow is one of them. He's the Speaker of the UK House of Commons. Jeremy Corbyn also doesn't want to go. He thinks that Trump's values are not UK values, so we shouldn't meet with him. Okay, it's fine. You can meet with Hamas. You can meet with Hezbollah. It's okay. It's all right. Meet with all them terrorists and the IRA, but you can't meet with Trump because his values aren't British values. But Hezbollah and Hamas are, and IRA. And I'm not even saying IRA or Hezbollah or Hamas are even bad. I mean, I applaud anybody who's fighting for their land. I support anybody. I mean, if you're just killing people because they're infidels like ISIS does, then I don't support you. But if you are fighting for your people and your land like the IRA is doing, Hamas, Hezbollah, ANC used to do, I support you 100% and say something about that. But that's who he meets, and I would say that they don't have British values. But let's talk about John Bercow, because this one particularly annoys me. There's so many white folk are calling Trump racist. It's mostly white folk these days who are calling Trump racist. I mean, I think that black folk and colored folk are really, I think they can take Trump or leave Trump. Even I myself, I like Donald Trump. I voted for him because I'm dual citizen, Canadian born, Canadian. I reside in Canada, but I'm an American citizen because I lived in the U.S. for a long. I went to high school there, went to middle school there, so I can vote as a citizen in the U.S. elections. I can do that. It's my right. So I voted for Trump. I don't agree with a lot of stuff that Trump has done. Well, I should say this. One of the only things I disagree with Trump on is his bowing down to Zionism, his worshiping of Zionism, licking the butt crack of that criminal Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't support that type of Zionist rats. I don't support it. But the Trump that I like is the Trump that I saw this morning where he tweeted that Sadiq Khan was a stone cold loser, which he is. He couldn't have said it any better. I couldn't have said it any better myself. That's the kind of Trump I like. But John Bercow is calling Trump a racist, though he has forgotten his own racist past. And let me take you back to the 1980s. When Donald Trump, back in the 80s, was opening up Mar-a-Lago to black folk and Jewish folk in West Palm Beach during a time when black folk and Jewish folk were the most hated thing in West Palm Beach. Even more hated than the hurricanes and the cyclones. Black folk and Jewish folk more hated than that. But Trump opened up Mar-a-Lago to them. While he was doing that, you know what John Bercow was doing during that same time period? He was hanging posters which wrote "Hang Nelson Mandela" all over the place. And we now know that John Bercow, during the 80s, during the time when apartheid was at its most sensitive, was a part of a group called the Pro-Apartheid Federation of Conservative Students. So not only did he advocate killing Nelson Mandela, who, I'm not saying Nelson Mandela is perfect, but, for Nelson Mandela to really, not only after becoming president, not only tolerate white folk, but even go so far as keeping a lot of, for him to be that restrained as president really says something. the white folk in South Africa are really lucky that Nelson Mandela, after everything he went through on Robben Island, being arrested for trying to, give freedom and an equal opportunity to his own people, I mean, they are really lucky that he didn't come to power, round up every single white folk out there, and just shoot them. And he could have done it. And you know something? If it was me, after everything that he went through, I probably would have done it. I'll say it again. If I was Mandela and the white minority, the racist apartheid government at the time put me through what they put Mandela through and I got a chance at power, I'd have murdered every single white folk in South Africa. Nelson Mandela, and that's not saying I hate white folk, I'm just saying if I had gone through what he had gone through, that is what I would have done. 100%. The man was put through hell for doing nothing but for advocating a better and more equal and more free life for black folk in South Africa, because people don't understand. And a lot of white folk are going to be very sensitive and turned off by what I just said. But you people, these are the type of people who live in a bubble. They don't understand what other people go through beyond their own back door. Apartheid was a vicious thing for non-whites. And he wanted to make things better. He got that chance and he was so restrained. So though I don't think that the ANC should have ever had a chance at power, because I don't think that socialism has done well for Africa, I would not advocate killing and hanging Nelson Mandela. That's a racist thing to say. That's a very racist thing to say, especially since Nelson Mandela was really, really, really forgiving of the white folk. He didn't, really, in fact, I would say too forgiving. But that's the group that John Bercow was a part of. And let's read this article from the Daily Express, one of the good papers in the UK. House of Commons Speaker John Bercow was the chairman of the Pro-Apartheid Federation of Conservative Students while he was at university, notorious for producing Hang Nelson Mandela posters, stickers, and shirts, unearthed reports reveal. In 1986, the FCS was banned by then chairman of the Conservative Party, Norman Tebbit. Mr. Bercow's association with the group came up again after Mandela's death in 2013. Let's see here. There's more about this. There's a lot more about this that I want to read about. Because Bercow is also saying that he was not a part of this, but he was the final chairman of this group. So, he can't deny it. But in accordance with constitutional, no. Where's the other part of this, man? Okay, there it is. Mr. Bercow strongly denies taking part in any such activities, but he was the group's final chairman. So that's pretty much it. So not only was he supportive of killing Nelson Mandela, but he was a part of and chairman of a pro-apartheid group. And this is the guy who's criticizing Trump for being racist. In the 1980s, Donald Trump opened up Mar-a-Lago, his exclusive club, to black folk and Jewish folk in West Palm Beach, when almost every single other country club during that time was completely shut off to black folk and Jewish folk. I mentioned that black folk and Jewish folk were even more hated during that time in West Palm Beach than any hurricane you could ever put in Florida. They were hated. Donald Trump welcomed them. And as a result, many of the old money people in West Palm Beach still to this day can't stand Donald Trump. And I would even go so far as to say that many of them would be the ones calling Trump a racist, but they're not calling him a racist because they're afraid of racism. They're just calling him a racist because they don't like him. They don't like his power. They don't like his attitude. And really, these people are even more racist. And John Bercow is an extreme racist. I mean, if you are a part of a federation which is advocating the separation of black and white folk, and it's not even the separation of black and white folk. That's not even the worst part. Because there are even some black folk who say that white and black people should just separate and forget about this. I don't advocate that foolishness, that stupidity. I know Ronnie Cameron supports that crap. And I told him to his face that, hey, what you're saying is complete stupidity. And, we had an honest discussion about it. But what's even worse is that during apartheid, black folk were given the worst housing, the worst land, the worst jobs. They couldn't vote. They couldn't be members of any parliament. Even the Indian folk and the colored folk had their own little parliament. The black folk didn't. They had nothing. They had nothing whatsoever. The only jobs they could really do is servants' jobs and all this stuff. I mean, this is what black folk in South Africa were subjected to. They were subjected to all sorts of abuse. And when they tried to protest, they'd be beaten, and not just beaten, they would be literally, there are pictures of them being whooped and kidnapped and beaten to death by cops. And this is during the 80s, when it was at its worst, when black people were really standing up in South Africa and saying, hell no! This is our land as well. And in fact, we were here first. And John Bercow was supporting apartheid? And now he has the nerve to call Donald Trump a racist? The only one who's racist is you, Bercow. And if you don't repent, you're going to hell. You're going to hell. Donald Trump is not perfect. But you need to remember what you were doing back in the 80s and what Trump was doing back in the 80s. Trump was opening the door to black folk and Jewish folk. And you were fighting to make sure that Africans continued to live as second-class citizens in South Africa. That is the legacy. This is the Arana Nation. And I'm wearing this shirt, by the way. And no. One more thing. All these people who are boycotting all this stuff, and I'm wearing this to show my appreciation for the people of Britain, the common folk of Britain. Well, I say common, but they're really not common. I saw when Donald Trump left Buckingham Palace, a lot of pro-Trump people were cheering and everything. Pro-Trump British nationalists were cheering him on, and they were saying, USA, USA. I ain't seen any protests yet. I don't know where they are, but they must have chickened out. But if John Bercow and Jeremy Corbyn and Sadiq Khan and all these people, Sir Vince Cable, if they had any balls, they wouldn't boycott the state banquet for Donald Trump at Buckingham Palace. They would go and they would tell Donald Trump what they think of him to his face. They'd cuss him out, curse him out to his face. I mean, that's what I would do. Hey, if I was somebody, and let's say Justin Ataki and Mac Daddy Trudeau was coming over to my house. Let's say my parent, right now I'm at my parents' house right now. As I said, I'm on vacation right now, which ends tomorrow. But let's say they invited him over here. I would stay. I wouldn't run away. This is my parents' house. And just like they have the right to be at that dinner. They're British people. And that's their queen. They have the right. This is my parents' house. I would stand right here and I would have Trudeau come in. I'd curse him out to his face. I'd want nothing more than to see him in front of me. I'd want nothing more. Hey, if they had balls, that's what they would do. But these are chickens. They like to talk behind screens and talk about how Trump is racist and this and that. If y'all had any spine, you would be at that banquet and you would introduce Donald Trump with insults and tell him exactly what you think. I'd have more respect for you if you did that. But you're not doing it because you're chicken, you pussy. That's what you are. So you allow Donald Trump to go into your queen's palace. He's very comfortable. He doesn't care about any Trump balloon or some baby balloon. Let those vagabonds hang their balloon. Who cares? He's having dinner with his suit and his tie, and that's it. Y'all could have gone there and say exactly what you think of him to his face, but you can't do it because you're chickens. That's actually one reason why I think Sadiq Khan shouldn't be mayor again. That's exactly what I would have done if I didn't like Trump. But this is the Arana Nation.